Welcome to an episode of Here's How Now from Transform to Net Zero with Lisa Martin, Chief Procurement Officer at GSK, and Susan Kenniston, Global Head of Sustainability at Wipro. They're here to discuss how their companies engage with suppliers to reduce Scope 3 emissions and help businesses transform to net zero. So let's get right into it. Lisa, can you tell us about how GSK identified Scope 3 emissions hotspots and uses its sustainable procurement program to engage suppliers?
Yes, Nicole, happy to do so. So at GSK, we're getting ahead of disease by taking action on climate and nature. We've committed to a net zero, nature positive, healthier planet with ambitious goals set for both 2030 and 2045. About 8% of our carbon footprint comes from our own operations, fondly known as Scope 1 and 2. So 92% of our footprint then comes from Scope 3. So 33% of that overall emissions comes from the goods and services we buy from other companies. The balance there is our own indirect use of logistics and patient use for one of our key inhaler products, and a very, very small percentage on product disposal. In September 2022, we did launch our sustainable procurement program to our high impact suppliers. It requires those suppliers to take action on many dimensions of their supply chain, including carbon, power, heat, transport, water, waste, and the sustainable deforestation-free sourcing of key materials. From this year forward, from 2023 forward, among other things, their suppliers are required to disclose their emissions, set their carbon reduction targets aligned to the Paris Agreement to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees, and switch to renewable power and heat.
Thank you, Lisa. That is some great insight. It seems that we cannot solve the Scope 3 challenge in a silo. So I wanted to ask Susan a question. Susan, are you seeing a trend of collaboration across companies and industries to reduce the Scope 3 emissions?
Yeah, we are seeing that, thankfully. This is one of the hardest challenges that we have in terms of creating a more responsible extended value chain. And we're seeing that show up, as you mentioned, in two different ways. One of them is, just how the leaders themselves in this area are sharing some of their best practices with each other. So I think that we're seeing just more conversation across the leadership there. And then the second big area that we're seeing is where industries themselves, leaders of, in these sectors, are coming together to create more standards and data hubs of sharing some supply chain supplier data to make it easier for both the suppliers who are learning how to do this to share and be more transparent themselves, follow these new measures and standards, but also for the companies that are reliant on that supplier data. So we are beginning to see more industry-based kind of supply chain supplier data hubs, and that's only happening because of the collaboration across those industry leaders and some of the sectors that are focusing on this. This is absolutely accelerating some of the progress that the companies are making and getting line of sight on what the status is with the suppliers so they can help them.
Awesome, thank you. Collaboration is truly very important. And on that note, Lisa, how does GSK specifically collaborate with other companies on reducing Scope 3 emissions?
Yes, thank you. We do agree that collaboration is going to be key. This is one area where we don't want to compete with our peer companies. We want to all work together. But I'll give you two specific examples. We are part of the Sustainable Markets Initiative Health Systems Task Force. That's made up of CEOs from 7 global healthcare companies. In 2022, that task force announced joint action on near-term emission reduction targets and accelerating the delivery of our net zero pathways by healthcare systems addressing emissions across their supply chain, patient care pathways, and clinical trials. The second key example was the Energize program, which we launched in 2022. It's being led and facilitated by Schneider Electric. And what that is doing is allowing suppliers of the healthcare system, along with the healthcare companies themselves, to encourage the use of renewable energy and decarbonized electricity throughout the pharmaceutical value chain. We started out with 9 sponsor companies. We are now up to 15, and those companies are actively working together to create PPAs, purchase power agreements, for themselves and their suppliers, specifically in certain geographies where the suppliers on their own wouldn't have enough scale or knowledge or capability to do their own PPAs.
That's awesome. Great insight. So, as we all know, Scope 3 is a big challenge. And the question is, where do we start? So, Susan, where would you advise companies to start with supplier engagement to tackle the Scope 3 challenge?
Yes, I think, reflecting a little bit about what we've done internally in Wipro and also what we're seeing just engaging with our clients in, activating around Scope 3 with their supply base. A lot of times the best thing is to think about it from a supplier relationship management construct around your sourcing strategy, how you onboard them, your performance management, and just your operations. An example of what we've done around that with Wipro is, we started by prioritizing a list of suppliers based on spend, top 75 suppliers we identified, and we did that using a valuation framework, a capital evaluation framework, which was very useful. And then through those top suppliers, really, we leveraged an assessment framework. I think one of the things that we're recommending with our clients right now is the Transform to Net Zero assessment framework. It is fantastic in terms of the detail of looking at areas around engagement, standard measures, reporting status of their suppliers, and use that to inform then a prioritized subset of suppliers to work with. In Wipro, we got down to about 25 to 30 suppliers, and then we engaged with them one-on-one to really understand where they're at from not just an emissions perspective of Scope 3, but also in the construct of looking at where they're at for their social factors, their other human and natural capitals. And so that was really, really helpful to actually hear and see where they're at, and then bring them in terms of onboarding, training programs, and more, just to help them be successful. So that's worked really well with us. In the background, one of the other things that we've done is, while we're doing that, is building out some of that data ecosystem to help you begin to have the rigor and bring it into your normal processes of, business reviews and more, just to help them see and the transparency of what you're seeing and what they're seeing together to advance it more collaboratively.
Thank you. That is great detail and great pathways to get started here. But speaking about the resources at hand, like the supplier transformation framework, I wanted to ask Lisa, so there are many resources out there. How does GSK leverage the available resources and the standards out there to enable supplier climate action?
Yeah, in addition to leveraging the existing resources that Susan, those were great tips, and the standards via the Sustainable Markets Initiative that I just shared, we're leveraging industry shared research approach like Energize as well. But another example is a program that we recently launched called Activate. So Activate is a program for decarbonization of active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are key to many, many products that us as well as other global pharmaceutical companies produce. The program is facilitated by Manufacturing 2030, and it's rolled out now to 21 countries across the globe. With high levels of interconnectivity, a global footprint, and hundreds of supplier sites across the overall industry supply chain, there's a substantial opportunity to drive a positive impact through collaboration in the sector. The program supports the decarbonization of a key segment of the value chain, which is that when you make active pharmaceutical ingredients, it generates a lot of heat. And so we've got to work together to find technology solutions, the provision of practical tools, expert advice, and also to get some access to green financing for those companies that need to invest in their own manufacturing facilities to create that change. So far this year, in 2023, we've had 32 active pharmaceutical ingredient suppliers registered for the program. And now we're working together across our peer companies to complete the first step of collecting all their baseline information. As Susan says, that's the first step. You need to understand where they're starting from so that they can, put their own roadmap together, which hopefully will be aligned to many of our industry timelines.
Thanks, Lisa. Both of you touched on a very important subject, and that is supplier climate data. It is the basis for solutions, collaborations, and certainly supplier engagement. So I want to pass the mic to Susan for a bit. How can companies best collect supplier climate data and integrate emission reduction queries into their supplier relationship management processes?
Yeah, and very similar, I think Lisa talked about it again. It is a foundation to, the overall program of really enabling more transparency around your supplier positioning for their footprint. And so, as we talked about a little bit, it is good to think about that SRM construct overall and bring data in right at the beginning when you're doing your sourcing strategy, and really gleaning the best that you can get from these new hubs that are emerging by industry. And as Lisa mentioned, some of them are very kind of getting oriented towards these niche areas, whether it be around chemicals, the apparel industry, the automotive industry. They're really great hubs of now where the industries are convening to call out requirements around the supplier's data kind of gathering, but also to advance the quality of what they're doing and bring that into the procurement processes. So I think that that's one of the very first important steps, is to make sure you're leveraging those hubs. And then almost always you do have to increment up some of that data collection with your own assessment extension. So you might have questions that are important to you and your company, and you can add to the data that you're collecting in those assessment questions to get the information that you need for your sourcing strategy. And so at the very beginning, really kind of teasing out what is that framework of questions and the data sources that you'll get. Many of the solutions out there today, they are advancing to help you capture both that core information, but also create your own assessment survey extension. And we really recommend that. And beginning to learn what that assessment set should be overall. And then to your point, bring that into your onboarding of them into your normal procurement processes and systems, bring them into kind of a data ecosystem for performance management. We really do, recommend in that area, especially in the data management area, is really leveraging the maturing landscape around data, sustainability data. Many of our key partners are advancing the space right now, specifically with data models around climate added for the extended value chain. This is important because you get the measures that are based on the regulatory frameworks, and you get the global protocols applied so that you can trust the data coming out of that to be something that you can use with trust and faith going back to your suppliers, but also in your own disclosure and reporting systems. So, it's important that incoming data, what you're collecting there, but also where you're landing and how you're using it, as more and more of this data is going into financial statements and more.
Thank you, Susan. That is some great information and recommendations. So I wanted to now give the mic to both of you guys, maybe starting with Lisa. Any final advice on supplier engagement for companies who are seeking to transform to net zero?
Yes, thanks. So there's lots of things you can do, and I think we've both touched on some of them, but I'll keep it to a list of 5 that are, I think, really key to success. One is just setting that clear expectation and target. So as we talked about originally, identifying your own hotspots, because some companies may have thousands and thousands of suppliers, but you've got to really be able to identify the high impact suppliers that are going to help you reach that goal and not diffuse your efforts across your full list of suppliers. So figure out your baseline and then set clear expectations and targets, working in a one-on-one way, the way Susan described it. We found that to also be the most helpful rather than in large groups. I think collaborating with the suppliers, take the time to listen to their challenges. We really are approaching this extremely collaboratively and very openly. We want to set clear expectations, but we also want to partner. And if it's education, if it's support, if it's helping them removing their own internal barriers, or creating more programs like Energize and Activate, which will lift the tide for everybody. I really do think that we need to encourage industry-wide collaboration and partnership. As Susan said, there are many sectors now working together. And the best thing about that is you don't reinvent the wheel. You're going to be able to learn a lot from your peer companies. And there are great, resources and tools available within those teams. Then mechanically, it's very important to create clauses in your contracts around your expectations and integrate sustainability into those clauses, both upfront with RFPs and your sourcing strategy, as Susan talked about, but then hold yourself and your supplier accountable through a contract mechanism. And then, of course, the most important part is the regular monitoring and reporting, to track performance, because I don't think all of this is going to be easy, and it won't be linear, but you've got to work together to track the performance. And many of us, I know inside GSK, we've created our own reporting hub, which my team is reporting into. As Susan said, we are all now disclosing a lot of our progress and our challenges, both the good and the bad, in a lot of our annual reporting. So, you've got to find a seamless way, and every company may be a bit different about that, but I think it's very important to make sure that, again, for those high impact suppliers, you're tracking this on a regular basis and working together. So those are my 5 key tips.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. And Susan, same question for you. Any final advice on supplier engagement for companies who are seeking to transform to net zero?
Yeah, I think that first of all, of course, leverage the resources. This is, and just acknowledging one of the hardest spaces in terms of introducing, a more responsible business, end to end in your extended value chain. And so I think acknowledging how hard it is, and giving yourself a little bit of grace because it is new. This is new. And so I think where you can leverage those best practices, leverage the industries, leverage the resource, for example, from Transform to Net Zero, anything you can, that was built with many brains, and lots of great skilled people that have been working on this for many years. So I think that that's really important. I think the other thing that's interesting is in acknowledging that you are transforming your extended value chain. It's about suppliers, but it's very much about how you engage with your suppliers very strategically. And so I think, a lot of times we get bogged down in the metrics and gathering this data, and we forget about the broader picture of the sourcing strategy of even, for example, thinking about their location strategy, of thinking about your inventory strategy with them. And so really thinking about it holistically at that front end, because all of that helps reduce their footprint when you think of it like that. So I think it's really important to think of this very strategically and with the metrics at the same time. I think that the prioritization goes without saying. This is very important in this first step of understanding which are the pain points. Is it cost basis? Is it location basis? What are the risk factors of your suppliers and the footprint impact that makes you want to put them in that first cohort or second cohort of your journey with them? I think that that's an important aspect of having that lens with them, of kind of being in partnership with them, in terms of innovation and training, and making making it fun. You can make it very competitively fun, especially with some of your top cohorts, because these are new muscles for everybody in the company and for them. And so I think, really engaging with them in new ways. I've seen some companies do really good jobs at this, and it's really incredible to see. I think the last thing is that, don't forget to engage the functional leaders. This cuts across the whole company. What the material sourcing aspect of this. When you're in manufacturing, of course, all your suppliers, logistics, your suppliers there, out in retail. So every functional technology, they're all included in the sourcing and making decisions with you. And so the more that you can kind of federate that kind of accountability and relationship of sourcing, pulling in those leaders, you'll on this much quicker, and you'll kind of operationalize it faster as a company. So I think that that's really important, to include all the functional leads and how you make changes as well. The last thing, I got one more thing. Lisa, it was great talking about the contracting. Really, so putting this in contracting, but don't forget about putting in contracting digitization expectations. So you also want them to be sending you data, and many times, they just don't have the digital requirements in supporting that. So think about how they do that, not just what they're doing there, to help them be successful as well. So, yeah.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Lisa. This is a wealth of knowledge and information and recommendations that our Here's How Now listeners will be very, very grateful for. So thank you very, very much.